I'm Hanadie, reporting for Kids First. Today I have the pleasure of interviewing Tom Bancroft, the producer of Pencils vs. Pixels. Mr. Bancroft has 25 years of experience in the animation industry, most of which was for Walt Disney Feature Animation, where he was an animator for 11 years, where he contributed to 10 animated feature films, including Beauty and the Beast, The Lion King, Aladdin, Mulan, and Brother Bear. He has illustrated over 50 children's books, designed websites, and so much more. Today, let's learn about the documentary, Pencils vs. Pixels. Okay, so I'm just going to ask you a couple questions. What inspired you to produce a documentary, Pencils vs. Pixels?
Well, a friend of mine who's the director of the film, he was somebody that always wanted to be an animator, but never got to. He's an artist, but not an animator. And he came to me and said, I have this amazing idea. What if we did a documentary where, it's about my generation of the 90s and 2000 animators and, what happened to 2D animation, because it kind of disappeared and a lot of people don't know that story of what happened to it. And when I heard that, I was like, why didn't I think of this? I am in. I'll be the producer, and I will also call all my friends from my generation of animation and add to that too. And let's make a movie. We'll start talking to them and interviewing them. And sure enough, that's how it started. And it's just evolved after about 7 years into Pencils versus Pixels.
Can you elaborate on how the traditional hand drawn technique influenced computer animation?
Yeah, happy to. There were even before me, there's an even older generation called the Nine Old Men at Disney. There were a bunch of people in the actually like way back in the 1940s that were basically making rules and principles of animation about squash and stretch and things that we use today, and they still use in computer animation today too. So a lot of the principles of animation that were developed way back then are still in use today in computer animation. And it's really what brings Toy Story and Woody to life. So yeah, there's a lot of overlap. Or Spider-Verse, there's even more so, because they're using those principles in computer animation, but they're also applying some 2D drawing into the animation too, more directly.
The title Pencils vs. Pixels suggests a competition. Can you discuss the tension between traditional animation and computer animation and how this theme plays out in the documentary?
A really good question. Yeah, I'd like to say it was a competition, but really, if you watch the movie, what you'll find out is, to your viewers, that it was almost a replacement. And so that pencil, the title, it is pretty provocative on purpose to kind of get people to wonder what's this about. But it does point toward that moment in the early 2000s, about 2005, where basically computer animation had come in and films like Shrek did amazing money and made a lot of money. And then before that, of course, Toy Story. And pretty soon they just stopped making 2D animated feature films and replaced them with computer animated films. And that really meant a lot of people lost their jobs that were in the 2D animation side of the art form. Some of them transitioned over to computer animation, but it was really, that's kind of the heart of what this movie's about, is that conflict that we thought would mean us animators, we thought we could coexist and kind of keep making 2D and keep making CG films. But what ended up happening is business people stepped in and said, no, that means we need to do away with 2D and just have CG.
So, your documentary features interviews with some animation industry luminaries. What were some of the most fascinating stories you uncovered while filming?
It's interesting. There were so many, and what really kind of came out of it was what I realized as we were interviewing so many people, and it almost happened at a certain point of the questions, almost every single person started to get very serious. And it was right at that point where, I mean, we would talk to them about, like, what were your favorite characters to work on? And, tell us how you got into animation. And those stories were sort of inspirational and excited. They'd be excited to tell those. But there became a kind of a point where it became almost like therapy. And it was really when we started talking about, well, tell us how it was when computer animation came in, and what happened to your job then, and what did you have to, what were the decisions you had to make about your career, that people would get very serious, and they started realizing they had never really talked about it. They hadn't really kind of gotten it off their chest about some of that turmoil that they went through for a good 10 years of trying to figure out and transition. And so that was really the most telling thing, is that we didn't see it getting that serious. We didn't see people starting to cry. We didn't think that would happen. And it did.
So, your documentary features the transition from hand drawn to digital animation style. What were some of the challenges and opportunities presented during this period of time?
Yeah. So I say it in the movie. It's actually a line I have in the movie, which is something I've said before, which is, to me, as an artist, you had to figure out, why did I get into animation when that transition came? When many of the jobs for 2D animation went away, it became a real kind of a soul searching moment for many of us. And to me, what that meant was, okay, it broke down to two groups. Is like, you either got into hand drawn animation because you love to draw, and drawing characters is what drove you there, and telling stories through characters, or you got into it because you like to animate and make things move. And so if you just loved animation in general, you could probably transition over to CG animation. But if you got in it because you love to draw, and that was me, I tried CG animation and on VeggieTales. I don't know if you remember that, but I animated some computer animation on that, and I just missed drawing. I that was my true love. And so, I had to follow my heart and follow my true love.
As a producer of this documentary, how has this film influenced your future in animation?
I mean, it does make me want to make another movie. It was a long process. I said it took us about 7 years. And I don't know. I mean, COVID was part of that. There were a lot of slowdowns that caused that to be so long. So we definitely could make it a lot quicker the next time. But it did make me go, there's a lot of stories I'd like to tell that are related to this subject, from voice actors and other sort of sub thoughts in this genre that I think a lot of people really want to hear. I am doing kind of my dream job already, but I'd love to layer in telling more stories through documentaries too.
Your background includes work on Disney classics such as The Lion King, Beauty and the Beast, Mulan. Can you share a memory or a moment from that time that has influenced your career?
Yeah, I can. So there was a point, I don't tell this story in the movie, and it's a long story, so I'll try and make it short. But, I'd been at Disney probably 8 years and worked on a lot of films, probably 4 or 5 films by that point. And I got to be a supervising animator on Mulan, and I was going to animate Mushu and design him. And I was starting to design him. And what ended up happening is Mushu became a more and more important character in the movie as I was working on it. They kept giving him more scenes, and they brought in Eddie Murphy. He wasn't supposed to be the voice originally, but they ended up getting Eddie Murphy, and he was a really big star at the time. And so it got to be to the point where even the president of Disney Animation was saying, is Tom Bancroft the guy to animate Mushu? Because he's kind of new. Shouldn't we get somebody more experienced to do Mushu? And so very literally my job was on the line. And so very early in the process, I had to prove myself and do a few production scenes. My first scenes on Mulan, it was a make or break situation. And fortunately, I passed. They liked them, and I was able to keep my job.
Pencils vs. Pixels is available for purchase on major platforms November 7th. Thank you. Bye.